Hank, whenever I'm ready when you are.
Okay. As soon as she tells me it's recording.
Okay.
We're good to go.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the May 3rd, 2022 Preparation Entry Subcommittee meeting of PEPSC. I'm really happy that everyone's here that's able to show up today. I know it's a busy time and I know that everyone has lots to do, but I think you'll find today's discussion to be maybe one of our most important ones as we move forward and try to arrive at our final product to at least put forward as a draft for consideration by PEPSC and the state board. So it's great to have all of the voices here today. You know, go ahead and click it, Kim. The agenda and the minutes from our last meeting were both sent out via email by Kim. And would somebody please make a motion to accept the minutes that were submitted?
Heather Bauer, so moved.
Do we have a second? Anyone?
Randy, second.
Thanks, Randy.
Everyone's being polite.
All those in favor? Well, if you're not in favor, speak up. That's a new Robert rule. That motion passes. We also have the agenda, which you can see in front of you here. Can I get a motion to accept the agenda for today's meeting, please?
I'll motion. This is Erin.
Thanks, Erin. And a second?
This is Randy. I'll second.
Okay, thanks again, Randy. Any discussion or any questions about this one that you see before you? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, if you'll just raise your hand, I think I can see everybody here. Okay, that one passes. Thank you very much. You'll see on the agenda that, if you'll go back one, Kim, if you'll see on the agenda in the introduction, I'm going to leave that for Van to come back to because that's going to be the work of our small group breakouts today. But it's going to be structured around 3 questions that are all kind of trying to get at the same thing as we try to figure out how we want this final model to look. So we'll break out and then come back together and do some whole group sharing out and see where we end up at the end of it. Okay, Kim. And as you remember, we have our norms for our committee. I won't read these to you because you guys have been an amazing committee that are very collaborative and work well together and don't mind speaking your mind, which we love. So thank you, and I hope you keep doing that. Okay. And as always, does your idea have impact on our students? And is it measurable in an authentic setting in the presence of students and their learning? Always the guiding principle here for excellence in teaching. Go ahead, Kim. And I'll let Van take over here.
Okay. Thank you, Hank. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to walk you through the estimated timeline. The co-chairs met with the folks at DPI early last week, and so both the framing of the conversation today and this timeline were discussed in that meeting. So the subcommittee, we as a group have 3 remaining meetings, the one today, the one in June, and then in July. The language that we will continue to work on and frame for what ultimately will become the recommendations will be presented to PEPSC for discussion at the August PEPSC meeting, and then it will be reviewed and discussed again for a potential approval at the September PEPSC meeting. Assuming that PEPSC were to approve it and move it forward, it would go to the State Board of Education at their October meeting for presentation, and then continue with the State Board in the November-December timeframe for adoption approval by the State Board of Education. So this is the timeline as we're projecting it right now. So for the subcommittee work that we have over the next 3 meetings, we have these reminders. One, the goal of the subcommittee meetings is to make changes as determined to the current draft model. So we'll see draft language. You would have seen this before out of PEPSC and in other venues. So the goal is for us to make changes as we determine to the current draft model. The subcommittee should focus on their own priority buckets, meaning our what has been our focus through this process. If we have feedback outside of our own area of focus, we can send that into Kim, Tom, and Andrew, and they will move those questions or feedback over to the appropriate subcommittee to take our what we may have to move over to them under consideration. A quorum is not needed to finalize any changes that are made by each subcommittee, so we can continue to revise and refine language. And this will be the draft that will be sent to PEPSC for consideration, discussion, and approval by PEPSC at one of its regular meetings. So let me pause there for a second. Does anybody have any questions about what those bullets mean? Okay, Kim, we can go ahead and go.
Dinah Lease has her hand
Oh, I'm
raised.
sorry.
Sorry, just under the wire, Dan.
Okay.
My question is about the quorum not needed to finalize any changes. I've noticed that while we've been meeting, it's been increasingly difficult for some of our public school partners to participate and I'm just wondering about the quorum requirement going into the summer, particularly when some folks might not be on contract, and how we might negotiate that to make sure that we have input from the field. Has DPI considered that, or the PEPSC subcommittee? Just question.
So one thing that the licensure subcommittee did when they were considering measures is that they provided a survey, or not a survey, an opportunity to vote outside of the meeting, and then I was able to add those votes in appropriately and give a final vote that way. So that is something that can be done. We would need to do that in a timely manner.
Thank you, Diana. And Kim. Okay, these two diagrams you would have seen before. And Kim, can you blow those up just a little bit more? I know people have the presentations, but for the sake of, there you go. These are the responsibilities and priorities, the pathway components. We've seen these before in previous meetings, but it lays out the work that's being done by each one of the subcommittees and the areas of focus in their work. The other side is the interface of the work that's being done across the 4 subcommittees. And I will use this as an opportunity to point out we've had joint subcommittee meetings and the co-chairs have joint co-chair meetings. So if we move information or points that should be discussed by another subcommittee, that information does get moved and it does get discussed over in the other subcommittees. I think, Hank, it's safe to say we have forwarded more of that out than what has come to us in this process, particularly around the compensation and the licensure components. We've tended to move questions out to the other groups for consideration. But in this one, you can see the intersection of the responsibilities that come under our particular subcommittee, and you can see the interface with the other what the other committees are doing. And I think it's, I mean, I would say also, based on the experience we've had so far, the other subcommittees have been as robust in their discussions and considerations as we have been. So there's some deep discussion going on around these different within the different subcommittees.
Tom has his hand raised.
Tom?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that that one-way direction is getting ready to change for you.
Yeah.
We've had some discussions in in another subcommittee where we kind of made it clear that the questions that they were raising were under the purview of this group. So I think you should expect some feedback coming your way soon.
Thank you, Tom. So we're about to, I don't know how many, Kim, how many people do we have on right now? So we have enough to do breakouts. We've got,
Yes, I made them 3 or 4 people per breakout session.
okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into breakout sessions. The first breakout group is going to have 50 minutes. Each group is going to have a primary question. You got those in the Google Doc that Kim sent out. But Kim, if you could back up to that slide that has the 3 questions. There you go. That slide. These are the 3 questions, the 3 inset bullets that you'll see for each one of the breakout groups. And they are these are a result of the co-chairs meeting that Hank and I had with Kim, Tom, and Andrew a few days ago, and to sort of articulate the thread that runs through all 3 of them. It's basically the way the pathways structure interfaces with and through license 3. And the ways that right now it's articulated that it interfaces or intersects in some way with license 3, and the ways in which that intersection might not be present. And so one part of this, if you think about all 3 questions together, is where those intersections exist, and assuming they should. The other is where they don't, and should they, if they don't currently have that intersection with license 3, do we understand what makes that the case, and also should they or should they not in the particular question that we're going to deal with. Hank, did I just capture what we talked about for an hour?
Yeah, I think you're right on there. And again, I think you'll see a lot of crossover between the questions, trying to get at this from a number of different ways. But I think it's important work for us to consider today.
Right. So just to go over the 3 questions quickly, so everyone understands all 3 of the questions. Is the achievement of license 3 synonymous with meeting all competencies and requirements for completion of an approved EPP? So in essence, what we would expect of an EPP as we know them to function and educate and prepare educators in North Carolina, would any pathway and set of strategies that prepare one to be license 3 have a parallel set of competencies and requirements? We would expect them to be parallel to what we know goes on in EPPs. Or is it only a matter of meeting stated competencies for this level through the provision of evidence using one of the given options from the current draft of the model that we saw out of PEPSC a couple of months ago? Can a person hold license 3 by meeting all evidences expected of an EPP without going through an EPP? Or would the expectation, or what would the expectations for meeting those equivalencies be? Question number 2, is there a pathway to licensure 4, which allows an individual to meet all competencies without completing coursework, credentialing, professional development, etc., as well as supervised clinical experiences, which is not developed by, offered, or evaluated through an approved EPP? This could include future innovative EPP PSU partnership programs, which are aligned with the curriculum provided by the sponsoring EPP. That part in parentheses is noted in the model language. So if you go back to that presentation, you'll see references to this interface between EPPs and PSUs for people who are moving toward licensure 4. And then the third question, what is the role of and accountability for EPPs who sponsor apprentice, license 1, and license 2 individuals as an affiliate, but do not develop, offer, or evaluate the curriculum and clinical experiences, or who have a limited role in any of these activities? assuming that there is the possibility of a pathway that is not primarily, quote, controlled by an EPP. So where the EPP is a partner, but not in that more primary role that we would see in an EPP program, to what extent are the EP or is the EPP accountable for what happens in that particular access point and pathway? So these are the three questions that came out of the co-chairs discussion that we'll use in our breakout groups. Each breakout group will have a primary question. Then if you have time, you can go to a second question. And these are substantive questions. We acknowledge that going into the breakout groups.
Christina has her hand raised.
Yeah, Christina.
So I think I need some definitions, maybe. Kim, can you go back to that screen we were just on? So can you all help me understand what it means to be how are we defining affiliate? An EPP is an affiliate? Where's that word?
It's in number 3, third bullet.
Right.
Right.
I
I think what I was thinking of there is, so residency licensed students currently affiliate with the university, but they're also our students in our program that we develop. I'm thinking of an affiliate in this term as somebody who we may be partnering with a PSU to sponsor in some way or support in some way, but they're not necessarily going through a program of study that we created or evaluate.
So with that, so they would be enrolled in the course or somehow involved with, but not in a program, so they wouldn't count as being part of one of our programs. They wouldn't have, is that how you're imagining affiliate?
Yeah, so that I think that's what we're trying to decide is what responsibility will we have for somebody who's not maybe registered for a course or an official member of your EPP or your program. So I guess the bigger question is, are we okay with those potential programs being created and started that don't include the EPP as the main creator of content and evaluation? And if that's going to happen, then what role should the EPPs play in those kinds of programs, and what kind of responsibility should they have in terms of accountability for the students who they're supporting through those affiliate relationships as opposed to being their actual students? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I think the word sponsor and affiliate. So if the EPP was sponsoring an individual, but they're not, but they're not in a, I guess that's the question that breakout group needs to discuss.
Yeah,
I don't know what that would look like.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I was thinking, is that we would have that kind of discussion, because the question becomes, would we provide some kind of clinical supervision for students that are being trained through another program as a part of our partnership agreement with our public school partners, if these things actually occur? What's our role if these things do happen? If there's some other track that doesn't include the EPP as a significant player in the provision of the program.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's helpful.
Sure.
Thanks.
I think you can also, Christina, think of the word sponsor as supporting. So a district and an EPP have some kind of co-constructed learning experience and sequence that sits outside of what we typically think of as, quote, matriculation. They have been admitted to and are the responsibility academically of the institution of higher education. And this would be a parallel experience that potential teachers could have, but it's not sitting over in that transcripted experience. So they're supported and they're affiliating with the university and the PSU, by the way, but they're not quote matriculating in the traditional sense. And there's an outcome that warrants their holding the license, apprentice license 1 or license 2. Any other questions?
I have one, Van. It's Diana here. I'm just, I heard Christina say that that group will need to address that. Are we going to have the opportunity to rotate through groups to address all 3 questions, or how are we going to be structured? That's a process question for today.
You'll have more than one question when you get in your breakout group, and I'm trying to flip through. When we come out of the first breakout group, then we're going to have 45 minutes as a whole group, so we'll be able to talk across all 3 of the questions.
Right. So there'll be a 50-minute session. And if you have time after your primary question to go into the other 2 questions, Diana, feel free to do that. And then as we all provide our feedback during the 45 minutes, the whole group discussion, you can chime in to whatever you were able to talk about during your group, besides your primary question.
I think, unless there are other questions, we're ready.
Good to go? Okay.
Hank,
Yes.
we're going to need about another hour in our breakout group. We were just in. So at this point, we got 45 minutes. And Kim, we had 3 breakout groups.
We did end up with 3. Yes, we did.
Okay, so I don't know that in our breakout group, we determined a spokesperson. We did a lot of note taking. So if we could, Kim, if we could just take 3 or 4 minutes for each group to share out the general themes of your discussion, and then we can use the remainder of the time to talk more across the group. I don't know. Question 1, I guess, would be the best way to start.
Sure. So this is group 1, Hank's group, which has Diana, Jennifer, Julie, and Scott.
Diana, would you mind leading us through? We'll jump in if we hear anything.
Okay, yeah, pull me back if I get this wrong, everybody. Thank you. We, just as I feared, took all of our time being in one question, and so I'm looking forward to this debrief. Thank you for structuring some time for that. In our document, which I'm assuming everybody can see, if you wanted to hop in there, I've highlighted what I think are probably our 4 big takeaways and recommendations as we move into this next phase of work. The first is that we want to have maximum flexibility to address these initial performance, but we fear lacking consistency in the range of possible models that has been presented. NESIS was an example of this, where the lack of inter-rater reliability, the lack of consistency in implementation across the state has bred some concerns, and probably is feeding into some of the concerns in the field about how this new model may be implemented. So we propose that we need more training and accountability for those conducting the observations to ensure inter-rater reliability and confidence in those evaluation ratings, particularly if we're looking to use them more for those teachers who do not have EBOS through either the peer or the qualitative growth review. Next, we talked, and after some discussion, we reached consensus that completion of a state-approved EPP would lead to license 3 directly. And we consider this to be those students who maybe come to an undergraduate campus for a bachelor's degree and completed, or those who enter an alt pathways supported or offered by an EPP. NC Teach was a great example that we had in our group.
Can I
Next,
jump in real quick?
please.
I just want to make sure that that's clear. It's not only, I think our group was saying it's not only that it leads to 3, but that there is not a route that's not an approved EPP. So the state approved EPP, whether it's a school system or some other entity or our traditional universities and colleges, if you're not an approved EPP, then you can't get somebody to level 3. So in reality, everybody would land at level 3 at some point once they completed their program. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kim, go ahead to group 2, and then after we do all 3, we'll.
Group 2 is your group van, and it's Christina, Aaron, Dyson, and Cheryl, and yourself.
Would anyone in group 2 like to capture that conversation in 3 minutes?
Aaron and I have been playing hot potato over text. She took the notes, so I'll take one for the team and try to summarize. But please jump in because I might get too wrapped up in it. We spent a lot of time trying to untangle the questions, but I think where we landed is in response. Is the achievement of license 3 synonymous with meeting all competencies and requirements for completion of an approved EPP? Or is it only a matter of meeting the stated competencies for this level through the provision of evidence? I think when we get to the last part of the question, can a person hold license 3 by meeting all evidence as expected of an EPP completer without going through an EPP? And what would be the expectations for meeting all those equivalencies be? So where we arrived on that is that basically what it comes down to is everyone has to meet the same standard. There can't be 2 separate standards. So what we currently call an EPP and EPP completion, we know that that is all the evidence points to that being the route that has the best outcomes for kids. And so regardless of their pathway, everybody needs to demonstrate that they meet those same standards at license 3. And this comes down to making sure that, we're protecting kids. We don't want kids to be able to spend 5 years in a classroom before they reach level 3 and never have met those competencies and not be, we want to make sure there's safeguards in place to protect kids so that we don't have somebody sitting in a classroom for 5 years that's not doing anything positive for children. We talked about what we mean by an approved EPP, because we think there's lots of ways that you could be an EPP, but there needs to be some safeguards in place to ensure that candidates are going through some kind of systematic, developmentally appropriate and comprehensive program for adult learners to become educators. It doesn't necessarily have to be a 120 credit hour degree program, but they need to we need to have some assurance that candidates are getting a comprehensive program and that they are meeting the same standard. Because again, we know that the best route to becoming an effective teacher is through a comprehensive EPP program. And so we've got to have some kind of rigorous measures to demonstrate the candidates, to show the candidates meet set of standards. We need to make sure that it's explicit that those standards are the in-task standards. We talked about in-task standards. And that there needs to be a triangulation and a collaboration between all the stakeholders, higher ed partners, PSU partners, other educators, and that there needs to be a triangulation of data that, you know, can't just be the IAT says so or the PSU says so, but we need to have some kind of triangulation and measure in place that says, you know, we all agree that this candidate is meeting these standards at this level. What am I missing? So the pathway to licensure 4 question. Which I guess is the one we were really supposed to be talking about. I think ultimately we said, no, you can't skip anything. Everybody has to show those competencies, right? And so the way that we assure that everybody's meeting those competencies is by having some kind of a process in place that would say, yes, you are an EPP. You have demonstrated that you have something in place that is comprehensive and that will result in meeting these standards. Did I get it all, Van, Aaron?
Yeah, quite well.
Okay.
And then the third group is Randy's group. Jeff, Heather, and Maya with Randy.
I think it's me, but please jump in if I get off track here, friends. We were really looking at affiliation as 2 separate entities. And so we talked about the traditional route where somebody is fully affiliated with an EPP and enrolled in formal coursework. And then this idea of being affiliated but separate and what that might look like. And we really looked at that as more of an embedded professional development model that could either be delivered in person or via Zoom, but that it would have a component of competency-based or micro-credentialing, depending on how that would work, but also real-time coaching, being in classrooms so that people were getting feedback about their practice, not just best practices or theory. We were also talking about how outcome measures would have to be differentiated for these apprentice through license 2 versus license 3. And that it didn't seem fair for the students or these novice teachers or the EPP to be held for the same standards if we know they haven't met the competencies yet. We talked a little bit about how EVOS data is shaky at best, but perhaps a better marker may be looking at the qualitative growth review and also looking at are an EPP's people, whether they're affiliated or affiliated but separate, moving through those licensure levels. So is the apprentice moving to level 1? Is level 1 moving to level 2? And that may be a better accountability model for EPPs than outcome measures, especially 3 years down the road, when we know the further they're out from us, the less impact our program may have on them versus what's already happening in their school or district. Did I miss anything, friends?
I think you got it. Well done.
Hey, Van, can I point out, Diana Lee's put a couple of things in the chat from group 1 that we didn't get to say in that first part, just so you can see. There were a couple of other discussions we had that I think are pretty relevant to our overall discussion.
We have 32 minutes before the top of the hour. Any observational comments at this point? I will offer one for our breakout group. I thought our conversation was fantastic. It was just a great discussion.
And I have a comment and a question. We had a great discussion in our group as well. That's my comment. I'm grateful for our group members for that. My question is, I was curious whether group 2 came to a similar conclusion as group 1. What I heard from group 1 was that, hey, the EPP has to be central to this as we move forward, and there's really no other way around that. And I was curious if group 2 really came to that same conclusion.
Yes, but with the caveat that an EPP doesn't have to look, we feel like an EPP could look a lot of ways. What we want to make sure is that there's that safeguard in place that whatever your EPP looks like, whether it's a traditional undergraduate program or a non-degree program or a program through a PSU, or there's lots of ways that one could be an EPP, but that EPP designation is the safeguard that makes sure that there is a coherent and comprehensive program in place that will result in candidates meeting the same set of standards. Does that clarify?
Yeah, thanks, Christine.
Aaron put a comment in the chat. Aaron, I don't know if you want to follow up on that.
Yeah, I was just saying, then that also then puts a lot of weight on the EPP approval process. And so making sure that there is a rigorous EPP approval process, which I think over the years has morphed and changed and whatnot. And so just making sure that that's structured and in place in order for that to work.
I think one other point that we talked about in our group, and it was around Christina's point about the yes, but, and it's a rethink, her point about rethinking what we mean by approved EPP. What is an EPP and how does one become approved? To Aaron's point. And then how do you create a space where a person, regardless of the licensure area, but certainly in the first 3, has access to the knowledge-based professional learning, the skill development, the clinical practice, to be able to provide evidence that they can engage in the practices as early as possible that we know correlate to student learning. And that can't take 4, 5, 6, 7 years, because you can do a lot of damage to kids if the learning curve is that long. And that the second piece is, given what we know about the evidence we currently have of the knowledge base and its application that occurs within the structure of EPPs, that we want to capitalize on that as much as possible. We want to build out on that as an asset, but the structures of EPPs and the access points would need to change to be able to support the range of the different pathway components, which goes a little bit over into question 3, but what that infrastructure and those access points look like. But our evidence tells us that those standards of practice that occur in what we currently call approved EPPs is critical. So we want to give more access to it, applied in different ways.
And somewhat related to that is group 3, talking about that third question and the accountability model for different pathways. Are we at a place where perhaps some of this can be determined by data? As we move forward, can we collect data to see, do outcome measures for different populations of candidates who have different engagement with EPPs? Are they differentially, what's the right word? Do they provide differential levels of validity of inference around properties of EPPs? i.e., if a student is not fully matriculating from either an undergrad or an MAT, do their outcomes at the end of the day provide the same, level of inference around properties of an EPP as someone who doesn't fit that bill? Well, we're going to have data on that. We probably already have some data, and that was Jeff's point, that we could maybe even go back and look at some of this. But as we move forward, are we at a place where we can actually have some of this determined by data that's collected? So
I don't know if any of the DPI folks have is a great insight. Do we have, and can we manipulate that data that way?
I'm sorry, I missed what the underlying question regarding the data was. Can you repeat that?
I will try, Tom. So the idea is if we're looking at outcome measures, and let's just say EBOS for now, but it could be any of the outcome measures on effectiveness. Do those outcome measures lead to have differential quality of inference on the overall property of the EPP based on the engagement that student had with the EPP? To give you an example, right? We can use outcome measures for students who have gone through the full, 4-year undergrad program or an MAT, and contrast that to someone in NC Teach, or some other program where it might even be the engagement of the student might even be a little more distal than that. Is there a way, based on data that we either have now or can collect in the future, to evaluate whether the quality of the inference on EPP property or quality is equally good across all these different categories of students?
Categories of students or categories of EPPs?
I'm thinking categories of graduates or of candidates coming out. So Tom, let me just give you just a really simple example. If we use EVOS scores for students who are coming out with their 4-year degree or an MAT, do we feel equally comfortable? Do we have evidence to suggest that we should be equally comfortable making statements about an EPP for individuals who have come out of a program who haven't gone through the full 4-year or 2-year MAT?
So, I see what you're saying. So basically, even within an EPP, is there differences in we'll just use the general term, effectiveness of teachers who do a residency program, do that same EPP as opposed to those who do the EPP embedded into their 4-year undergraduate or do an MAT? Is that?
I think I might reposition it, Tom. I might think of it as if we're comfortable saying that EVOS scores have meaningful inference around the quality of an EPP. For students who go through a traditional program, do we have the same level of confidence that an EVOS score holds the same quality of inference of EPP quality for those who went through something like an NC Teach? Do EVOS scores have the same quality of making interpretations of EPP quality based on students who have had very different levels of exposure to that EPP?
I think I see what you're saying. And I think where I might have been confused is it sounded almost like you were saying it's not really the route, but is the measurement better? Do we get, let's say we were using something like the peer review process for somebody who did a licensure only process. Is that a better way to measure the impact of the EPP on that particular candidate than using EBOS, where just hypothetically EBOS may be the appropriate measurement tool for somebody that comes out of a undergrad, a traditional EPP program?
Right. And I think, Tom, you mentioned an interesting, I think an important framework. If we're looking at the impact of the EPP on quality, right, on effectiveness, does the measurement of that impact of the EPP on the effectiveness, does that change depending on the route that the person took and the exposure that that candidate had to the EPP's preparation?
Very interesting question that I would love to dig into. That's fascinating.
And it was Jeff's idea that there might be data out there already, so I don't want to take credit for that.
Right, and I think if we're talking about multiple measures of effectiveness, we have to assume that some EPPs may be, just by their nature, better equipped to yield those outcomes than other EPPs.
Right.
And that's not to diminish, that's just to say there's many ways to think about what it means to be an effective teacher. It would be really hard to do with principal observation because that's the vast flat wasteland of data. I mean, it doesn't do much for us. I think there you would need some additional inputs for some kind of qualitative measure. But yeah, Dr. Dempsey, I have a question, if I may.
Yes, please.
It's kind of a consideration for I think it was group 1. So the completion of an EPP as meeting the requirement to hold a license 3. And my assumption is that conferral of the degree or of successfully completing the EPP would be the thing that the candidate submits to DPI for the license. Is that correct? Like that's the only documentation that you're proposing would be needed to issue the license.
I'm not sure that we have come to a complete agreement on that, but I think there is at least a discussion that if you complete all the requirements of an approved EPP, then we don't need any external measures beyond what the EPP sets for itself to be able to recommend somebody for licensure if they complete the program.
Well, if that's not a decided issue, then I don't want to. I'll wait till that's a little further down the road. I don't want to cut off any thought. I just wanted to think about that.
That is an interesting point, and I don't know if Aaron is still on. I don't want to mangle your comment that you made, but given what Tom just asked and Hank just said, it calls the question on if we're going to rethink what we mean by EPP in North Carolina and how they're structured, and then who are the partners that are part of an EPP. There's got to be a high level of rigor in the evidence we're looking for out of that EPP. So if an EPP is the support, whatever that EPP that might be the support system to a school district, for example, for people in different licensure levels, approved EPPs have got, what we mean by approved EPP is going to take a tighter definition and articulation of rigor than we currently probably have. Aaron, did I totally botch that?
No, that's pretty spot on. Because, I mean, right now, I mean, there's many of the IHEs go through national accreditation, and that serves as one way to be approved as an EPP. But then there's also review by DPI. And so, and I know, Tom, we've had conversations about this too, of thinking about that process and how to make sure that that's rigorous and transparent along the way. So, but yeah, I mean, if we expand, because because I know at one point we've had lots of discussions of that EPP, basically anybody can kind of be an EPP, but we look at the outcomes of that EPP, and then, there's the whole sanctions model and all of that. But what does that mean in the long term? Because just like we've talked about, like in our group, we talked a lot about safeguards, right? Because 1 year of students should be unacceptable where a teacher is not effective in their classroom, right? But how many years is an EPP going to be able to put out teachers in that way as well? So making sure that we just have a really defined, rigorous process for EPPs.
This is Tom, Dr. Dempsey, if I may.
Yeah,
Not
please.
respond to that, but just an additional comment. I think it also has impacts on the accountability model. So right now, there's a certain threshold of teachers who can't meet certain expectations. That's a pretty big, there's a pretty large percentage of teachers that cannot meet the expectations on the accountability model before sanctions begin. But to Dr. Horn's point, what's the acceptable level that could come out of an EPP that puts an ineffective teacher in front of a student? What are we all comfortable with is we can let this number pass, but no more than that.
And the other thing that it does with the accountability system is it radically changes what we had submitted as our proposal for a new accountability system that would be fair, because it all hinged on EdTPA and some of the assessments that were required across all of the EPPs, and that we felt we had more control over impacting. So I guess that's another part of our discussion as to what that accountability looks like if we don't have some way to keep a consistent measurement like a standardized assessment.
We got a little less than 15 minutes, by the way.
Just a clarifying question that I had, with the comments about the elimination of the test, is that the elimination of the requirement of the test or the elimination of the test? So I'm wondering if offering these additional options to meet the requirements to hold the license, the micro-credential or the peer process, does that satisfy the elimination of the test as a barrier, or are we talking about the elimination of the test or the elimination of the requirements of the test? And there's a difference, I think, that I would be interested in knowing what that distinction is.
So if I wasn't in that group, but I guess back to what our group discussed, like it's a question of equivalency, right? So like what is the test a measure of, and is it equivalent? And I think the other piece is like, do we need the test in addition to something else? So like, so when we talk about EPP completion, right now, the way things stand is you have to complete an EPP and you have to meet some testing requirements, right? So we talk about having an equal standard and making sure that these things are equivalent. So whatever it is, whether there are different options, for me, the thing that's important is that all of the options meet the test of equivalence in terms of, are we holding everybody accountable to the same standard? Every teacher has to meet the same standard of competence, and that the measures that we're using need to be equivalent, and that there needs to be agreement about that. So I think, the tests, for me, I have some concerns about how good of a measure they are. some of the tests anyway.
I think that's right, Christina. And it makes me think about, and I'm sure this keeps Tom up at night more than any of us, that our outcome data for teacher effectiveness is going to become highly important to showing whether or not our EPP efforts are actually doing what they're supposed to do. And how can we do that in a fair way, in a way that really reflects, as Randy would say, helps us to infer what part the EPP played in either doing a good job with that or maybe not meeting the standard there. And right now, we've only got a certain percentage of EVOS data. NESIS, we pointed out the issues with that. So the need to create outcome data that we could truly trust and that's fair in the accountability system, I think would become a must if we're going to open up the potential for a lot of different measures being used to prove the standards of what a EPP should prepare a student to be able to do. And
well, and I think also we need to, a discussion about, are we just measuring it for measurement's sake, or does it truly demonstrate, like, does it correlate with impact on student learning? Does it, like, just having equivalent measures within themselves doesn't really making sure that it is valid of what we really want to get at versus just having measures so that we can have multiples, right?
Yeah, I think Tom, to your question and then everybody's comments, if you sort of have that separation line between license 3 and license 4, and I'm going to, Christina, try to use language you used in the breakout. In learning permit license 1, license 2, license 3, we're trying to assess the capacity of the person to engage in practices that when they were to become an autonomous educator, they're in a classroom without another educator. We are seeing evidence that their practices correlate to levels of success where we see positive impact on student learning. And when they cross over into license 4, they're fully autonomous. They're in a classroom and the impact they're having is on them, is on their own practice. So, and it shows up in the evidence with children's learning, among other things. Prior to that, with the learning permit, license 1, license 2, license 3, we've got to have some kind of proxy assessment because they're not having an autonomous direct impact on student learning yet. They're still, in each one of those cases, they either work under the supervision of or they are paired with another teacher. So we've got to have a set, to Christina's language, we've got to have assessment tools and instruments that are telling us through a triangulated and validated way, they are engaging in the practices at a level of success that we know in license 4 correlates directly to positive impacts on student learning. Not being I don't live in Randy's world the way he would frame it, but Randy and Christina, did that sort of situate part of the response to Tom's question?
Yes, I think, what that measure is, how we're, and Randy and I brought this up previously. I think both of us have brought this up multiple times. We need to define the competencies. I think we've all agreed, in-task is the way those are defined, right? But then how are we measuring those? And do we have a measure that's in place? We know there's issues with the principal evaluations using NESIS. What are we going to put in place where everybody is measuring the same thing, and we have, Aaron's point is really well taken about, we agree that this is a valid measure that is measuring the thing that we want it to measure, and then that we have some reliability evidence that everybody's using it in a similar way, so that we have some confidence that we all mean the same thing. So that tool becomes really important for us to say, yes, this person can move from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, whatever their pathway is for acquiring the skills or competencies or however they go about doing that, whether it's through a series of coursework at a university or through some other mechanism, that we're measuring it and that we're all in agreement about yes, person A who's on pathway 1 and person B who's on pathway 2 and person C who's on pathway 3, that all of them are meeting the same standard.
And this is where I think way a long time ago, we were talking about having that one tool that could be used all the way through by schools and EPPs, apprentice through master teacher, so that everybody's on the same page and we're not changing language among these licenses.
This is Tom. That really resonates with me. And Van, I think that was a great way to put it. I am a firm believer that what we're measuring up to license 4 is competency. And then I see the application of that competency as effectiveness. And that's what we start to measure in license 4. So, and I'm a firm believer that EPP should be held accountable for developing those competencies. The decision to apply those competencies to your practice and be effective is largely within the individual, him or herself, and not a reflection of the EPP. That and I like the way you folks are talking about this. That I have to be honest. I don't know. I'm not an expert in them, but it sounds to me like the micro-credential, that demonstration of the skill in the presence of students, is the way that we really want to try to think about this. And I agree. The test doesn't really do that as well. I think for me and my staff, we just never contemplated taking the test out because we knew 80% of your teachers do fine with that. 80+% of your teachers, that gets them over the hurdle and gets them on their way. And we certainly didn't want to, just kind of pull the rug out of it from everybody. But I'm in total agreement. Some kind of monitored and measured assessment of those skills in the presence of students is really what we're looking for here, and to ensure that that's embedded in everybody that moves up potentially to the license 4.
Hank, we have 4 minutes left. And I know Christina had a suggestion when we were in the breakout group about a question we can incorporate into the next meeting. Christine, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but we're about to hit the time.
It's all right. I just, my comment was that I think we really need to spend some time digging into what that support looks like. I think in the model that Tom and Andrew presented last month, we renamed it. It's currently called the Beginning Teacher Support Program, but they had proposed an alternate name. I think we really need to, in this group, that falls firmly into our purview as I understand it from the slides, spend some time really digging into what that looks like, what that kind of support looks like, who is providing that support, what are the criteria for those individuals, because I think that's really an important piece of this. Again, as a safeguard for children who are going to be sitting in classrooms, we need to make sure that folks who are in those apprentice and license 1, 2, and 3, that they have adequate support in place to be able to develop their competencies, but with guidance so that children have some kind of a safety net. So I think that's something we need to dig into, make sure that we have time on our agenda to really dig into that.
And Kim, we can pull that off the recording and Hank.
Yeah, absolutely.
Plan the next meeting. Hank, we're down to 2 minutes now. I know we need to adjourn the meeting. So unless there are other burning questions, now we have one. Hank, I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. Thanks again for everybody being here and for all the good thought. I feel like we're still moving forward, and that's a great thing. So I guess I would ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting.
This is Christina, so moved.
Thank you, Christina. How about a second?
Aaron, I'll second.
All right. And you can affirm your wishes to adjourn by hitting the red X at the bottom and leaving the meeting.
Just one more thing. The next prep and entry meeting is June 10th, 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.